Good evening, and welcome back to Footnotes and Folly. I am Professor Reginald St. John Pemberton. In Part 1, Thomas Paine Anonymous Still, a year off the boat dismantled monarchy itself, from the Book of Samuel to William the Conqueror. Tonight the heart of the pamphlet, the section that turned a colonial quarrel over taxes into an argument for a new nation, thoughts on the present state of American affairs. Simple facts, plain arguments, and common sense that the debate ended when the first shots were fired in April 1775 that Europe, not England, is the parent country and that a continent cannot forever be governed by an island, and that reconciliation with a king who can unfeelingly hear of his people's slaughter is not policy but ruin. John Adams, no radical leveler, grumbled at the pamphlet's democratical notions even while its argument swept his own course forward, which is perhaps the neatest possible measure of its force. The complete text continues, in plain modern English. Let us begin.
In these pages I offer nothing beyond simple facts, plain arguments, and common sense. I ask only this of the reader: put aside prejudice and fixed opinions, and let reason and feeling judge for themselves. Put on, or rather do not put off, the true character of a man, and generously enlarge your view beyond the present day. Volumes have been written about the struggle between England and America. Men of every rank have entered the dispute, moved by different motives and aiming at different ends, but all their efforts have failed, and the time for debate is over. Arms as the last resort now decide the contest. The appeal to arms was the king's choice, and the continent has accepted the challenge. It has been reported of the late Mr. Pilham, who, though an able minister, was not without his faults, that when he was attacked in the House of Commons because his measures were only temporary, he replied, "They will last my time." If a thought so fatal and so unmanly should take hold of the colonies in the present contest, then future generations will remember the name of their ancestors with disgust. The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth. This is not the affair of a city, a country, a province, or a kingdom, but of a continent, at least 1/8 part of the habitable globe. This is not the concern of a day, a year, or an age. Posterity is virtually involved in the contest, and to the end of time it will be more or less affected by what we do now. Now is the seed time of continental union, faith, and honor. The smallest fracture now will be like a name scratched with the point of a pin into the tender bark of a young oak. The wound will widen as the tree grows, and posterity will rate it in full-sized letters.
Observe the scale of the wager Paine is laying before them. This pamphlet appeared anonymously in Philadelphia on January 10, 1776, signed only, written by an Englishman. He had been in America barely 14 months. 14 months, and already he is scolding a continent about its duty to posterity. One admires the nerve, one also checks the exits.
By carrying the matter from argument to arms, a new era in politics has begun, and a new way of thinking has arisen. All plans, proposals, and the like, made before the 19th of April, before the beginning of hostilities, are like last year's almanacs. They were proper then, but they have been replaced and are useless now. Whatever was argued by advocates on either side of the question at that time ended at the same point, namely, a union with Great Britain. The only difference between the parties was the method of bringing it about. One proposed force, the other friendship. But so far the first has failed, and the second has lost her influence. Since so much has been said about the advantages of reconciliation, which has passed away like a pleasant dream and left us exactly where we were, it is only right that we examine the opposite side of the argument. We should look into some of the many serious injuries these colonies suffer, and will always suffer, by being connected with and dependent on Great Britain. Let us examine that connection and dependence by the principles of nature and common sense, so we may see what we have to rely on if separated, and what we must expect if dependent. I have heard some people assert that because America has prospered under her former connection with Great Britain, the same connection is necessary for her future happiness, and will always have the same effect. Nothing could be more misleading than this kind of argument. We might as well claim that because a child has thrived on milk, it must never eat meat, or that the first 20 years of our lives should set the rule for the next 20. But even this grants more than is true, for I answer plainly that America would have prospered as much, and probably much more, if no European power had ever had anything to do with her. The commerce by which she has enriched herself consists in the necessities of life, and those will always have a market as long as eating remains the custom of Europe. That she has protected us, some say. That she has controlled our trade is true, and that she defended the continent at our expense as well as her own is admitted. She would have defended Turkey from the same motive, namely, for the sake of trade and dominion. Alas, we have long been led away by old prejudices, and have made large sacrifices to superstition. We have boasted of the protection of Great Britain without considering that her motive was interest, not attachment. She did not protect us from our enemies for our sake, but from her enemies for her own sake, from those who had no quarrel with us for any other reason, and who will always be our enemies for that same reason. Let Britain give up her claims to the continent, or let the continent throw off its dependence, and we would be at peace with France and Spain even if they were at war with Britain. The miseries of Hanover in the last war ought to warn us against such connections. It has lately been asserted in Parliament that the colonies have no relation to each other except through the parent country, that is, Pennsylvania and the Jerseys, and so on through the rest, are sister colonies by way of England. This is certainly a very roundabout way of proving relationship, but it is the nearest and only true way of proving enemyship, if I may use the word. France and Spain never were, and perhaps never will be, our enemies as Americans, but only as subjects of Great Britain. But Britain is the parent country, some say. Then the greater shame on her conduct. Even brutes do not devour their young, nor do savages make war on their families. Therefore, if the claim were true, it would only become a reproach to her. But it happens not to be true, or only partly true. The phrase parent or mother country has been cunningly adopted by the king and his parasites, with a low papistical design to gain an unfair hold on the credulous weakness of our minds. Europe, not England, is the parent country of America. This new world has been the asylum for persecuted lovers of civil and religious liberty from every part of Europe. They fled here not from the tender embraces of a mother, but from the cruelty of a monster. And this much is true of England. The same tyranny that drove the first emigrants from home still pursues their descendants.
That word asylum is doing heavy labor. Paine is not offering scenery, he is recasting America as a refuge for Europe's persecuted lovers of civil and religious liberty. This was part of his genius. Before independence had become respectable, he made it sound not merely possible, but morally spacious, the birthday, as he later says, of a new world.
In this wide quarter of the globe, we forget the narrow limit of 360 miles, the extent of England, and carry our friendship on a larger scale. We claim brotherhood with every European Christian, and we take pride in the generosity of that sentiment. It is satisfying to see how steadily we overcome local prejudice as our knowledge of the world grows. A man born in any town in England that is divided into parishes will naturally spend most of his time with people from his own parish, because their interests are often shared, and he calls such a man his neighbor. If he meets him only a few miles from home, he drops the narrow idea of a street and greets him as a townsman. If he travels out of the county and meets him in another county, he forgets the smaller divisions of street and town and calls him countryman, that is, county man. But if they meet while traveling in France or anywhere else in Europe, their local memory expands, and they think of themselves as Englishmen. By the same fair reasoning, all Europeans who meet in America, or in any other part of the globe, are countrymen. England, Holland, Germany, and Sweden, compared with the whole world, stand on the larger scale just as street, town, and county stand on the smaller one. These distinctions are too narrow for continental minds. Not even 1/3 of the inhabitants of this province are of English descent. Therefore I reject the phrase parent country or mother country when it is applied only to England, because it is false, selfish, narrow, and ungenerous. But even if we were all of English descent, what would that prove? Nothing. Britain is now an open enemy, and that cancels every other name and title. To say that reconciliation is our duty is truly absurd. The first king of England in the present line, William the Conqueror, was a Frenchman, and half the peers of England descend from that same country. So by the same kind of reasoning, England ought to be governed by France. Much has been said about the united strength of Britain and the colonies, and that together they might defy the world. But this is mere presumption. The fate of war is uncertain, and the phrase itself means nothing, because this continent would never allow itself to be drained of people in order to support British arms in Asia, Africa, or Europe.
Notice Paine's little historical dagger there. William the Conqueror, the Norman invader of 1066, becomes the founding credential of hereditary monarchy. Not divine perfume, but a French bastard with armed followers. Paine's point is not subtle, but then neither is a crown when one asks who first put it on.
Besides, what business do we have setting ourselves against the world? Our plan is commerce, and if we attend to it properly, it will secure for us the peace and friendship of all Europe, because it is in the interest of all Europe for America to be a free port. Her trade will always protect her, and her lack of gold and silver will keep invaders away. I challenge the strongest supporter of reconciliation to show one single advantage this continent can gain from being connected with Great Britain. I repeat the challenge. Not one single advantage comes from it. Our corn will bring its price in any market in Europe, and we must pay for our imported goods no matter where we buy them. But the injuries and disadvantages we suffer from that connection are beyond counting. Our duty to mankind at large, as well as to ourselves, teaches us to renounce the alliance, because any submission to or dependence on Great Britain directly tends to involve this continent in European wars and quarrels. It sets us against nations that would otherwise seek our friendship, and against whom we have neither anger nor complaint. Since Europe is our market for trade, we should form no partial connection with any part of it. The true interest of America is to steer clear of European disputes, which she can never do while her dependence on Britain makes her the balancing weight in British politics. Europe is too crowded with kingdoms to remain long at peace, and whenever war breaks out between England and any foreign power, the trade of America is ruined because of her connection with Britain. The next war may not turn out like the last one. If it does not, the people who now argue for reconciliation will then wish for separation, because in that case neutrality would be a safer escort than a warship. Everything that is right or natural argues for separation. The blood of the slain, the weeping voice of nature cries, "'Tis time to part." Even the distance at which the Almighty has placed England and America is a strong and natural proof that the authority of one over the other was never the design of heaven. The time at which the continent was discovered also strengthens the argument, and the way it was peopled adds still more force to it. The discovery of America came before the Reformation, as if the Almighty graciously meant to open a sanctuary for the persecuted in future years, when their own homes would offer neither friendship nor safety. The authority of Great Britain over this continent is a form of government that sooner or later must end. A serious mind can take no real pleasure in looking forward while firmly and painfully convinced that what he calls the present Constitution is only temporary. As parents, we can have no joy in knowing that this government is not lasting enough to secure anything we may leave to posterity. By plain reasoning, since we are running the next generation into debt, we ought to do its work as well, otherwise we treat them meanly and shamefully. To discover the right path of our duty, we should take our children by the hand and place ourselves a few years farther on in life. From that height we will see a view that a few present fears and prejudices now hide from our sight. Though I would carefully avoid giving unnecessary offense, I am inclined to believe that all who support the doctrine of reconciliation may be placed within the following descriptions: interested men who are not to be trusted, weak men who cannot see, prejudiced men who will not see, and a certain group of moderate men who think better of the European world than it deserves. This last group, through badly judged caution, will bring more calamities on this continent than all the other three. Many people have the good fortune to live far from the scene of sorrow. The evil has not been brought closely enough to their doors to make them feel how insecure all American property really is. But let our imaginations carry us for a few moments to Boston. That seat of misery will teach us wisdom, and instruct us forever to renounce a power in which we can place no trust. The inhabitants of that unfortunate city, who only a few months ago lived in ease and prosperity, now have no choice except to stay and starve, or leave and beg. If they remain within the city, they are endangered by the fire of their friends. If they leave it, they are plundered by the soldiers. In their present condition, they are prisoners with no hope of release, and in a general attack for their relief they would be exposed to the fury of both armies. People with passive temperaments look too lightly on Britain's offences, and while still hoping for the best, they are likely to say, "Come, we shall be friends again for all this." But examine the passions and feelings of mankind. Test the doctrine of reconciliation by the standard of nature, and then tell me, can you hereafter love, honor, and faithfully serve the power that has brought fire and sword into your land? If you cannot do all these things, then you are only deceiving yourselves, and by your delay bringing ruin on those who come after you. Your future connection with Britain, whom you can neither love nor honor, will be forced and unnatural, and because it would be formed only for present convenience, it would soon fall back into a condition more miserable than the first. But if you say you can still overlook these violations, then I ask, has your house been burned? Has your property been destroyed before your eyes? Are your wife and children without a bed to lie on, or bread to live on? Have you lost a parent or a child by their hands, and are you yourself the ruined and wretched survivor? If you have not, then you are no judge of those who have. But if you have, and can still shake hands with the murderers, then you are unworthy of the name of husband, father, friend, or lover, and whatever your rank or title in life may be, you have the heart of a coward and the spirit of a flatterer. This is not inflaming or exaggerating matters. It is testing them by those feelings and affections that nature itself justifies, and without which we would be unable to perform the social duties of life or enjoy its happiness. I do not mean to display horror in order to provoke revenge, but to wake us from fatal and unmanly sleep, so that we may pursue some fixed purpose with determination. It is not in the power of Britain or of Europe to conquer America, unless America conquers herself by delay and timidity. The present winter is worth an age if it is used rightly, but if it is lost or neglected, the whole continent will share in the misfortune. And there is no punishment that any man will not deserve, whoever he is, whatever he is, and wherever he is, if he becomes the means of sacrificing a season so precious and so useful. It goes against reason, against the universal order of things, and against all examples from former ages to suppose that this continent can much longer remain subject to any outside power. Even the most optimistic person in Britain does not think so. The greatest reach of human wisdom cannot now devise any plan short of separation that can promise the continent even 1 year of security. Reconciliation is now a deceptive dream. Nature has abandoned the connection, and art cannot take her place. For as Milton wisely expresses it, never can true reconcilement grow where wounds of deadly hate have pierced so deep. Every peaceful method has failed. Our prayers have been rejected with contempt, and have only served to convince us that nothing flatters vanity or hardens obstinacy in kings more than repeated petitions. Nothing has contributed more than that very measure to making the kings of Europe absolute, witness Denmark and Sweden. Therefore, since nothing but blows will do, for God's sake, let us come to a final separation, and not leave the next generation to cut throats under the violated and meaningless names of parent and child. To say they will never attempt it again is idle and imaginary. We thought so when the Stamp Act was repealed, yet a year or two undeceived us. We might as well suppose that nations once defeated will never renew the quarrel. As for matters of government, Britain does not have the power to do this continent justice. The business of governing it will soon be too weighty and too complicated to be managed with any tolerable convenience by a power so distant from us and so very ignorant of us. If they cannot conquer us, they cannot govern us. To be always running 3,000 or 4,000 miles with a story or a petition, then waiting 4 or 5 months for an answer, which, once received, requires 5 or 6 more months to explain, will in a few years be looked on as folly and childishness. There was a time when it was proper, and there is a proper time for it to stop. Small islands that cannot protect themselves are proper objects for kingdoms to take under their care, but there is something very absurd in supposing that a continent should be governed forever by an island. In no case has nature made the satellite larger than its primary planet. Since England and America, in relation to each other, reverse the common order of nature, it is clear that they belong to different systems, England to Europe, America to itself.
That island and continent argument is Paine at his most devastatingly plain. No labyrinth of political theory, just geography with its boots on. He knew his readers had waited months for answers from across the Atlantic, while Britain knew America chiefly through petitions, taxes, and gun smoke. The satellite, he says, has no business commanding the planet.
I am not led by pride, party feeling, or resentment to support the doctrine of separation and independence. I am clearly, positively, and conscientiously persuaded that it is the true interest of this continent to be so, that everything short of that is mere patchwork, that it can provide no lasting happiness, that it leaves the sword to our children, and shrinks back at the very time when a little more, a little farther, would have made this continent the glory of the earth. Since Britain has not shown the least inclination toward a compromise, we may be sure that no terms can be obtained that are worthy of the continent's acceptance, or in any way equal to the cost in blood and treasure we have already been forced to pay. The object fought for should always bear some fair proportion to the expense. The removal of North, or of the whole detestable Gento, is a matter unworthy of the millions we have spent. A temporary stoppage of trade was an inconvenience that would have sufficiently balanced the repeal of all the acts complained of, if such repeals had been obtained. But if the whole continent must take up arms, if every man must be a soldier, it is hardly worth our while to fight only against a contemptible ministry. Dearly, dearly, do we pay for the repeal of the acts, if that is all we fight for by a just estimate, it is as great a folly to pay a Bunker Hill price for law as for land. As I have always considered the independency of this continent an event that sooner or later must arrive, so from the late rapid progress of the continent toward maturity, the event could not be far away. Therefore, when hostilities broke out, it was not worth while to dispute a matter that time would finally have corrected, unless we meant to be in earnest. Otherwise, it is like wasting an estate on a lawsuit to regulate the trespasses of a tenant whose lease is just expiring. No man wished more warmly for reconciliation than I did before the fatal 19th of April 1775. But the moment the event of that day became known, I rejected the hardened, sullen-tempered Pharaoh of England forever. I despise the wretch who, with the pretended title of father of his people, can hear without feeling of their slaughter, and calmly sleep with their blood upon his soul. But suppose matters were now made up. What would be the result? I answer, the ruin of the continent. And that for several reasons. The governing powers that still remain in the king's hands give him a veto over all the law-making of this continent. And since he has shown himself such a bitter enemy of liberty, and such a man hungry for unlimited power, is he, or is he not, fit to say to these colonies, "You shall make no laws but what I please"? And is there any person in America so ignorant that he does not know, under what is called the present Constitution, this continent can make no laws except those the king permits? Is there any man so foolish that he cannot see, after all that has happened, that the king will allow no law to be made here except one that serves his own purposes? We may be enslaved just as effectively by having no laws in America as by submitting to laws made for us in England. After matters are settled, as people call it, can anyone doubt that the whole power of the crown will be used to keep this continent as low and humble as possible? Instead of moving forward, we shall move backward, or spend our lives quarreling or ridiculously petitioning. We are already greater than the king wishes us to be. Will he not try later to make us smaller? To bring the matter to one point, is a power that is jealous of our prosperity a proper power to govern us? Whoever answers no to this question is an independent, because independency means nothing more than deciding whether we shall make our own laws, or whether the king, the greatest enemy this continent has or can have, shall tell us, "There shall be no laws but such as I like." But you will say the king has a veto in England. The people there can make no laws without his consent. As a matter of right and good order, there is something very ridiculous in the idea that a young man of 21, as has often happened, may say to several million people older and wiser than himself, "I forbid this or that act of yours to become law." But here I will set aside that kind of answer, though I will never stop exposing its absurdity, and will only say this: England is the king's residence, and America is not. That makes the case entirely different. The king's veto here is 10 times more dangerous and deadly than it can be in England, because there he would hardly refuse his consent to a bill putting England into as strong a state of defense as possible, while in America he would never allow such a bill to pass. America is only a secondary object in the system of British politics. England considers the good of this country only so far as it serves her own purpose. Therefore her own interest leads her to suppress the growth of ours in every case where our growth does not promote her advantage, or where it interferes with it even slightly. What a fine condition we would soon be in under such a second-hand government, after all that has happened! Men do not turn from enemies into friends merely because their name has changed. And to show that reconciliation now is a dangerous doctrine, I affirm that it would be good policy for the king at this time to repeal the acts in order to restore himself to the government of the provinces, so that, in the long run, he may accomplish by craft and subtlety what he cannot accomplish quickly by force and violence. Reconciliation and ruin are closely related.
Notice the timing. Paine is writing while George III's October 1775 speech, declaring the colonies in rebellion, is making its way across the Atlantic. Reconciliation, to Paine, is no longer a family quarrel over bad ministers. It is asking the man who has just named you rebel to become your constitutional babysitter. A chilly arrangement, that.
Second, even the best terms we can expect to obtain can amount to nothing more than a temporary expedient or a kind of government by guardianship, which can last only until the colonies come of age. Meanwhile, the general condition of things will be unsettled and unpromising. Emigrants with property will not choose to come to a country whose form of government hangs by a thread, and which is every day tottering on the edge of commotion and disturbance. Many of the present inhabitants would use the interval to dispose of their effects and leave the continent. But the strongest argument of all is that nothing but independence, that is, a continental form of government, can keep the peace of the continent and preserve it unharmed by civil wars. I dread the result of a reconciliation with Britain now, because it is more than likely to be followed by a revolt somewhere or other, and the consequences of that may be far more fatal than all the malice of Britain. Thousands are already ruined by British barbarity, and thousands more will probably suffer the same fate. Those men feel differently from those of us who have suffered nothing. All they now possess is liberty. What they once enjoyed has been sacrificed in its service, and having nothing more to lose, they scorn submission. Besides, the general temper of the colonies toward a British government will be like that of a youth whose apprenticeship is nearly over. They will care very little about her. And a government that cannot preserve the peace is no government at all. In that case we pay our money for nothing. And pray, what can Britain do, whose power will exist only on paper, if a civil tumult breaks out the very day after reconciliation? I have heard some men say, many of whom I believe spoke without thinking, that they dreaded independence because they feared it would produce civil wars. Our first thoughts are rarely truly correct, and that is the case here, for there is 10 times more to fear from a patched-up connection than from independence. I make the sufferer's case my own, and I declare that if I were driven from house and home, my property destroyed, and my circumstances ruined, then as a man sensible of injuries, I could never relish the doctrine of reconciliation or consider myself bound by it. The colonies have shown such a spirit of good order and obedience to continental government that every reasonable person should feel easy and satisfied on that point. No man can give the slightest real excuse for his fears except reasons that are truly childish and ridiculous, such as the fear that one colony will strive for superiority over another. Where there are no distinctions, there can be no superiority. Perfect equality offers no temptation. The republics of Europe are all, and we may say always, at peace. Holland and Switzerland are without wars, foreign or domestic. Monarchical governments, it is true, are never long at rest. The crown itself is a temptation to ambitious ruffians at home, and the pride and insolence that always accompany royal authority swell into ruptures with foreign powers in cases where a republican government, being formed on more natural principles, would settle the mistake by negotiation. If there is any true cause for fear concerning independence, it is because no plan has yet been laid down. Men do not see their way out. Therefore, as an opening into that business, I offer the following hints, while modestly affirming that I hold no higher opinion of them myself than that they may help give rise to something better. If the scattered thoughts of individuals could be collected, they would often provide materials for wise and able men to improve into useful matter. Let the assemblies be annual, with a president only. Let the representation be more equal. Let their business be wholly domestic and subject to the authority of a Continental Congress. In this spirit, a government of our own is our natural right. 'Tis time to part. The birthday of a new world is at hand, and we have it in our power to begin the world over again. Let each colony be divided into 6, 8, or 10 convenient districts, and let each district send a proper number of delegates to Congress, so that every colony sends at least 30. The whole number in Congress will then be at least 390. Let each Congress meet and choose a president in this way. When the delegates have assembled, let one colony be selected by lot from all 13 colonies. Then let the whole Congress choose by ballot a president from among the delegates of that colony. At the next Congress, let the lot be drawn from only 12 colonies, leaving out the colony from which the former president was chosen, and continue in that manner until all 13 have had their proper turn. And so that nothing may become law, unless it is plainly just and widely approved, let no less than 3/5 of Congress be counted as a majority. Any man who would promote discord under a government form so equally as this would have joined Lucifer in his revolt. But because there is a special delicacy about who should begin this business, and in what manner it should first arise, and because it seems most suitable and consistent that it should come from some body standing between the governed and the governors, that is, between Congress and the people, let a Continental Conference be held in the following manner, and for the following purpose. Let there be a committee of 6 members of Congress, namely 2 from each colony, 2 members from each House of Assembly or Provincial Convention, and 5 representatives of the people at large, to be chosen in the capital city or town of each province, for and on behalf of the whole province, by as many qualified voters as choose to attend from all parts of the province for that purpose. Or if it is more convenient, those representatives may be chosen in 2 or 3 of the most populous parts of the province. In this conference, assembled in this way, the 2 great principles needed for public business will be united: knowledge and power. The members of Congress, assemblies, or conventions, having had experience in national concerns, will be able and useful advisers, and the whole body, being empowered by the people, will have truly legal authority. When the conferring members have met, let their business be to frame a continental charter, or charter of the United Colonies, answering to what is called the Magna Charta of England. Let it fix the number and manner of choosing members of Congress and members of Assembly, with the dates of their sittings, and let it draw the line of business and jurisdiction between them, always remembering that our strength is continental, not provincial. Let it secure freedom and property to all men, and above all things the free exercise of religion, according to the dictates of conscience, along with whatever else such a charter must contain. Immediately after this, let the conference dissolve, and let the bodies chosen according to that charter become the legislators and governors of this continent for the time being. May God preserve its peace and happiness. Amen.
Notice how boldly Paine borrows the prestige of Magna Charta, then turns it into something broader. He wants a continental charter, not 13 jealous little provincial arrangements. John Adams later disliked Paine's politics as much too democratic, and one can hear why. This is government dragged nearer to the people, with the aristocratic furniture removed and the constitutional silverware rearranged.
If any body of men should hereafter be delegated for this purpose, or for one like it, I offer them the following extracts from that wise observer of governments, Dragonetti. The science of the politician consists in fixing the true point of happiness and freedom. Those men would deserve the gratitude of ages who should discover a mode of government that contained the greatest sum of individual happiness with the least national expense. But where, some ask, is the King of America? I will tell you, friend, he reigns above, and he does not make havoc of mankind like the royal brood of Britain. Yet, so that we may not seem lacking even in earthly honors, let a day be solemnly set apart for proclaiming the charter. Let it be brought out and placed on the divine law, the word of God. Let a crown be placed upon it, so the world may know that, as far as we approve of monarchy in America, the law is king. For as in absolute governments the king is law, so in free countries the law ought to be king, and there ought to be no other. But to prevent any later misuse, let the crown, at the conclusion of the ceremony, be broken apart and scattered among the people, whose right it is. A government of our own is our natural right. And when a man seriously reflects on how uncertain human affairs are, he will be convinced that it is far wiser and safer to form a constitution of our own calmly and deliberately, while we have it in our power, than to leave so important an event to time and chance. If we neglect it now, some Assainalo may hereafter arise, seize upon popular unrest, gather together the desperate and the discontented, assume the powers of government, and sweep away the liberties of the continent like a flood. If the government of America should return again into the hands of Britain, the unstable condition of things would tempt some desperate adventurer to try his fortune, and in such a case, what help could Britain give? Before she could even hear the news, the fatal business might be done, and we ourselves might suffer like the wretched Britons under the oppression of the conqueror. You who oppose independence now, you know not what you do. You are opening a door to lasting tyranny by keeping the seat of government empty. There are thousands and tens of thousands who would think it glorious to drive from the continent that barbarous and hellish power which has stirred up the Indians and Negroes to destroy us. Its cruelty carries a double guilt. It deals brutally with us and treacherously with them. To talk of friendship with those whom our reason forbids us to trust, and whom our affections, wounded in 1,000 places, teach us to detest, is madness and folly. Every day wears away the little remains of kinship between us and them. Can there be any reason to hope that, as the relationship dies, affection will increase? Or that we shall agree better when we have 10 times more and greater matters to quarrel over than ever before? You who speak to us of harmony and reconciliation, can you restore to us the time that is past? Can you give prostitution back its former innocence? Neither can you reconcile Britain and America. The last cord is now broken. The people of England are presenting addresses against us. There are injuries that nature cannot forgive. She would cease to be nature if she did. The continent can no more forgive the murderers of Britain than a lover can forgive the ravisher of his mistress. The Almighty has implanted these unextinguishable feelings in us for good and wise purposes. They are the guardians of His image in our hearts. They distinguish us from the herd of common animals. The social compact would dissolve, and justice would be rooted out of the earth or exist only by accident if we were insensible to the touches of affection. The robber and the murderer would often escape unpunished if the injuries our spirits suffer did not provoke us into justice. O you who love mankind! You who dare oppose not only tyranny, but the tyrant, stand forth. Every spot of the old world is overrun with oppression. Freedom has been hunted around the globe. Asia and Africa have long expelled her, Europe regards her like a stranger, and England has warned her to depart. Oh, receive the fugitive, and prepare in time an asylum for mankind.
Oh, receive the fugitive, and prepare in time an asylum for mankind. From a shilling pamphlet, that is a considerable destination in one section, Paine has moved America from grievance to independence, sketched a continental charter, and crowned the law itself king. But in argument this large must still answer the practical man's question: can America afford it? In Part 3, Paine prices a navy ship by ship, answers the King's speech in his Appendix, and settles accounts with the pacifist Quakers of Philadelphia on his way out the door. Do join us. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly. And before the lamp goes out, a small request. If something tonight taught you, or surprised you, or simply delighted you, do leave a comment and tell me what it was. And if there is a work, an author, or a tale you should like me to take up next, set it down there as well. I read every one, and many an episode has begun its life as a viewer's suggestion. Until next time.